Welcome to History for the courses DSE ACS. This is the exam-based contact sessions for 2020 and your tutor is Mrs. Ndinelao Motoanaha. So I'm going to tell you first about the question paper. This history question paper, the question papers for April, May, August, and November. So all these 3 question papers will be 3 hours long. There will be 5 questions in each question paper, of which you are expected to answer all questions. You are provided with a study guide by Iol that you can make use of, plus some other sources like NAMCO Grade 12 History Study Guides. So the topics you are expected to, I'm going to tell you of what is expected in these 3 question papers. So Unit 1, it's about international relations. So international relations covers the following topics. So we have the Treaty of Versailles. Treaty of Versailles of 1919 that was attended by the Big 3. So here we have reasons why the Big 3 could not get what they wanted. Who are the Big 3? The Big 3 are the leaders from 3 countries that were representing these countries in the Treaty of Versailles. Before the Treaty of Versailles was signed, these Big 3 had to meet at Paris Peace Conference. The Big 3 were from France, USA, Britain. So when they were in the conference, Paris Peace Conference, they had to come up with an agreement towards the end of the conference. And that agreement that they have signed is what was called, or the so-called, the Treaty of Versailles. Now when they were in the Paris Peace Conference, they had different aims, of which they made this Big 3 not getting what they wanted. There are a lot of reasons as to why they could not get what they wanted, because each one of them had different aims concerning about punishing Germany as well as bringing about peace in the world. So you should be able to explain or giving reasons as to why they could not get what they wanted. For you to be able to give this, you have to look at what they were aiming at and what came about the Treaty of Versailles as a result of this, for you to be able to give these reasons. Now, as I have said, the Big 3 in the conference, at the end, they came up with an agreement. They have signed an agreement that we call the Treaty of Versailles. So what were the terms now? What is that they have agreed to? So you will be able to know all the terms, what they have signed, what they have agreed to towards the Paris Peace Conference. So now this Treaty of Versailles that the Big 3 have signed, because you know they have signed it upon Germany. And you know Germany was called in towards the end just to come and sign. So what is that has affected the Germans upon signing this treaty? So this is what we call the impacts of the Treaty of Versailles on the Germans. what were the bad effects of the Treaty of Versailles on the Germans. So now, looking at the Treaty of Versailles, when it was agreed upon, remember I said Germany was not represented in this Paris Peace Conference, but rather just called towards the end to sign. Whatever was signed, what was written there, Germany did not know. He only came to know when he was to sign, just to agree to it. But he was not told, no, this is what we have agreed upon you. So now, you as a history teacher, you must be able to make justifications upon this Treaty of Versailles. Would you say the Treaty of Versailles was fair or it was not fair? So make sure that you have reasons for justifications of this treaty. If you say it was fair, make sure you have reasons to justify that. If you say it was not fair, make sure you have also reasons to justify that. Remember, in history, we do not give one-sided answer. We give balanced. You must be able to give the reasons for fairness of this Treaty of Versailles as well as for unfairness of this Treaty of Versailles. So the last thing you should know in the international relations is the extent of the Treaty of Versailles. To what extent the Treaty of Versailles? How far is the Treaty of Versailles to be blamed on the outbreak of Second World War? In another word, how did the Treaty of Versailles cause the Second World War? Unit 2. It's about the League of Nations. Remember, the League of Nations was established in the 1920s. And this League of Nations was part of what has been discussed in the Paris Peace Conference. Remember, the League of Nations was also one of the terms, because it was those terms that were discussed, and that is what we call under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. As a result, it was one of the agreements that the leaders have signed or agreed upon, that there must be an organization to keep or to preserve peace in the world after the First World War. So now, what do you expect to know as far as the League of Nations is concerned? You must be able to know the reasons why the League of Nations was established. How do we call this? These are the aims of the League of Nations. So for you to be able to answer, to score marks on this, you should be able to name and explain. What do I expect here? Make use of what descriptions of these aims and be able to explain those aims in fully. So, League of Nations has got a structure. There are bodies that made up the structure of the League of Nations. So you should be able to know these bodies. So as well as knowing the functions, because each of these bodies have got the functions, have got aims as well, have got something to do in the League of Nations. For example, we have the General Assembly. Not the General Assembly, sorry, it's the Assembly, because the General Assembly is for the United Nations. The Assembly. What are the functions of Assembly? So you should be able now to know also these bodies of the League of Nations now. Which one has played the most important role? Which one is the most important body? Which one is that the League of Nations could not perform its functions without it? All right. Should also be able to know the weaknesses of the League of Nations. So the weaknesses of the League of Nations are the factors that led it to its failures. When you talk of the weaknesses, is the reasons why the League of Nations could not function, could not keep peace. So we have a lot of factors that contributed to these weaknesses. And you should also know how it caused the outbreak of Second World War. So we know one of the reasons why the Second World War started. It's because the League of Nations has some weaknesses, has failed to keep peace in the world. And this is what we call the weaknesses within the League of Nations. So you should be able to link it as to why it has caused the outbreak. When you talk of the outbreak, we mean the start of Second World War. So you should also be able to know the reasons for the weaknesses. I think we have talked about this. What is that caused the League to fail? Let's look at the successes and the failures. Because the League of Nations, and I would like to make some important notes on the successes and the failures of the League of Nations. The League of Nations was established in the 1920s. So during its first years of its establishment, the League of Nations has performed some successes, and as well as has also failed to perform its duties. So that is what we call the successes and the failures. And remember, when it comes to 1930s, from 1930 to 1939, the League of Nations did not succeed. Take note of this. If a question comes and it's asking about the failures of the League of Nations, for example, the question cannot come, you must be able to know how to answer history questions. It will ask you, for example, to what extent the League of Nations failed in 1930s. We know that our answers in history, we must balance it. We have to give the failures and the successes. Make sure that when you come across to a question like that, League of Nations has not successes. It did not perform any successes in 1930s. I'll repeat myself again. In 1930s, League of Nations does not have successes, but rather failed completely from 1930 to 1939. That's why the Second World War started in 1939, because there was no successes that the League of Nations has performed during 1930s. When we talk of 1930s, we mean 1930 to 1939. That's why the Second World War started in 1939, because the League of Nations has completely failed to keep the peace in the world. So there are a lot of failures of the League of Nations. Specific failures should be able to give the failures. In 1920s, should also be able to give the failures, the specific incidents where the League of Nations has failed. For example, in 1930s, we have the occupations of Ra. 1920s, not 1930s. In 1920s, the occupations of Ra. So you know that it was occupied in 1926, somewhere there. So these are the failures of the League of Nations in 1920s. This is just an example of the failures of the League of Nations in 1920s, and it's also one of our topics that we need to know in the examinations. You should be able to describe the occupations of Ra. What are those factors that caused or contributed to the occupations of Ra in 1926? And we also have some other failures of the League of Nations that you also need to look at. We have other failures of League of Nations in 1930s. That is the Manchurian and Japanese crisis. So you should be able to describe how Manchuria was occupied. you should be able to know how the Japanese crisis is the same, how they invaded Manchuria, and we also have a Italian invasion of Italian invasion of I forgot the African nation, Abyssinia. Thank you. So it's Manchurian crisis, which is the same because Japanese are the one who invaded Manchuria, and also the Abyssinian crisis. These two are the main failures of the League of Nations in 1930s. Now I would like to make an emphasis, before I move on to the Great Depression, emphasis on Japanese and Italian crisis. Remember, we have the big countries in the Council of the League of Nations. Don't forget Japan, don't forget Italy. These are the permanent members of the Council. But these are the countries that went out of the League's will. They invaded other countries. Look at the examples they have given as a member of the Council of the League of Nations. What is that example that they have given to the rest of the world as a permanent member of the Council? And the Council is the one that keeps peace, is the one that makes the League of Nations function. But Japan and Italy, the member of the Council, the permanent members, are the one that went out of the League of Nations will and they went to invade other countries. What example. Put emphasis on this. So let's talk about the Great Depression. Great Depression is one of the weaknesses, one of the factors that caused the League of Nations to fail. This was the Great Depression, that it's a weaknesses in the economy of the world. That happened in 1930s. When we talk of 1930s, we talk of 1930 to 1939. So it also contributed. You should be able to explain how it cost countries to invade other countries and how it contributed, because when they invaded other countries, it cost also, other countries to take revenge, and that is how they contributed to the Second World War. You must be able to explain this. Number 3, Unit 3, is the collapse of international order. The collapse of international order or international peace. This topic is about how the peace came to an end in the world. International means worldwide. So we are going to look at the factors that caused, the collapse of worldwide peace. What is that caused the peace in the world to come to an end? So if it came to an end, it means that somehow there was an outbreak of war. War is the only one that prevents peace. So now, in this worldwide peace, we have the most important thing here that plays a major role is Hitler's foreign policy. Most of the time, students do not know what foreign policy of Hitler is all about. So, for example, if I'm talking myself, I'm just giving you an example. If in Namibia, I'm giving you an example of Namibia, we have a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It has to do with international, outside. So now if we have to relate it to Hitler, we have to look at what Hitler did that affected international. So you have to know about this. For example, he went out of his way to break the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. So, for example, I will just give one example of the Treaty of Versailles terms. So the Treaty of Versailles says no, there must not be a union with Germany and Austria. What did Hitler do? He went on to do what? To make a reunion. That reunion, we call it Anschluss with Austria. So you should be able to know all this, because this Hitler's foreign policy has a lot of factors. You should be able to know what are these Hitler's foreign policies. You should also be able to know how they contributed to these foreign policies. Remember, I only gave you one example of the Anschluss, the reunion with Austria. There are a lot of points, because you should be able yourself to go in the book and find out what are this Hitler's foreign policy. I have only given you one example. And I explained to you what foreign policy is all about. So you should be able to know all these factors in Hitler's foreign policy. How did they contribute to the outbreak of Second World War? Remember, I said we are talking about the collapse of international peace, collapse of international order. So if there is no order, there is disorder that has been contributed, caused by Hitler, by doing these foreign policies. So, in addition to the foreign policy, you should be able to know all the factors now. All the factors. We have Hitler's foreign policy, I've talked about it. We have so many other factors, for example, the appeasement policy that I will just talk about after this. We have a lot of factors that contributed to the outbreak of Second World War. Don't forget the Treaty of Versailles has also contributed to the outbreak of Second World War. Don't forget, the League of Nations has also contributed to the outbreak of Second World War. So it's not only one factor. You link all these factors together. But the most important thing, you can know that, you can mention that no League of Nations has contributed to the Second World War. How did the League of Nations contribute to the Second World War? You must be able to explain this. So, in short, you should be able to know all the factors that caused the Second World War. Now, the factors that contributed to the outbreak of Second World War, we have also mentioned the appeasement policy. Do you know what appeasement policy is all about? Do you know what to appease is all about? What is to appease somebody? To appease is when you let someone do what is demanding for. You let somebody, for example, in this appeasement policy, Britain and France have given whatever demands Hitler has demanded for. So now, you must be able to know, how does this appeasement policy contribute to the outbreak of Second World War? Now, for you to get to that, first you must know what was the appeasement policy all about. And you should be able to give reasons. You must consult your book. You must consult other books that I have mentioned you should consult. There are also some other books outside there that I have not mentioned where you can get all this information to find out whether, or before you go to that, you must be able to know what are the reasons, what is that had caused Britain and France to appease Germany, to appease Hitler. Why did they permit Hitler to get all what he demanded for? What is that was in their mind to say, no, we must let Hitler just do what he wants to do? You must be able to give those reasons. And towards the end of this, you should be able now to evaluate. What is to evaluate? You have to make your justifications now. You must justify. To justify is to give your views now. Whether the appeasement policy was the right policy or it was the wrong policy. You must be able to give your views. No, it was right because of A and B. No, I think it was also wrong because of A and B. So that is how we expect students, history students, to answer questions. All right. There is also one important topic that you need to know. And this is also one of the factors that contributed to the outbreak of Second War. We cannot finish about these factors that contributed to Second World War, but you should be able to know what a Saar plebiscite is all about. You'll be asked questions like to describe the Saar plebiscite. If you don't know about Saar plebiscite, I want to make a note on this plebiscite. Plebiscite, another word for plebiscite is a referendum. Some students who do not know, they would be asking you, what is a plebiscite? A plebiscite is a referendum. And a referendum is a question. Are you for or against? So it just, in short, for people to either give their opinions if they are supporting or they are against. So now you have to relate this to Saar. I do not know what happened in Saar, so you must know the incidents that happened at Saar for you to be able to answer questions concerning Saar plebiscite. Now, in Unit 4, so after the international relations, you get to Cold War. Now, what do you need to know about Cold War? You should be able to define what Cold War is all about. If you know what Cold War is all about, then you'll be able to explain how Cold War has developed. In many cases, when we mark exam scripts, students get confused of the word development. When something has developed, it's how it came about. So you'll be able to explain the cause, not causes, cause. During now, that's how it developed. What happened? So you have to know the causes of Cold War. It's the same way as the development of Cold War. How did it start? So when we talk of a development, you check it how it started, how it, between there, and then towards the end. How was this war fought? All right. There are a lot of factors about this Cold War, but in these examinations, you must know specific topics about the division of Germany. Remember, Germany was divided after the Second World War. Leaders have met at Yalta. They have met at Potsdam Conference. They were discussing way forward because Germany was defeated. So at the end, they came up with a solution of coming up with different strategies now, how to bring about peace. So they decided now they're going to divide Germany into 4 sections for these 4 countries: Britain, France, Russia, USA. So these countries now, in as much as Germany, because Germany was defeated, it has got no one to rule it because it was completely defeated. They have also decided to divide Germany amongst them. But this division that we are talking about now here, this is not what is in the exams. Among us, that because of Cold War, Germany was divided into 2 sections because of Cold War: the communism, the capitalist. So that is what we are talking about. Because in many times when you talk of division of Germany, students relate it to how it was divided among us, the 4 countries. But we know it was divided like that. But at the end, it was divided into 2 parts because of this, the nature of Cold War, the fight between communism and capitalist. So Germany ended up divided between East Germany and West Germany. You should be able to explain why, what is that has caused this division. All right. We also came to know that when Germany was divided among these 4 countries, its capital city, Berlin, was also divided amongst these countries. So it was also as well as divided into 4 sections for these 4 countries. Now, just in the same way Germany ended up divided into 2, is the same way they have also put up a blockade in Berlin to separate East Berlin from the West. And this was caused because of what? Of communism, the fight between communists and capitalists. So you should be able to explain Berlin blockade. Why was it a blockade in Berlin? Now, because we are talking of Cold War, you should know the 2 countries that were the influencer in the sphere of this Cold War, USA and Russia. Now you must also be able to justify. You must be able to evaluate who is to be blamed for causing Cold War. Was it Russia's policy? Was it based on American policy? So by knowing what Cold War in general is, I hope you'll be able to find out and evaluate who is to be blamed for causing this Cold War. Is it Russia or America? Unit 5, this is Namibian history. So Namibian history is divided into 2 parts. The Germans' colonial administration over Namibia and South Africa United Nations over Namibia. In the first part, we are going to look at the Germans' colonial administrations over Namibia. So what are the topics that you should know here? You should be able to know the Germans' establishments of colonial rule over Namibia. How did Namibia end up into the Germans' hands? You must be able to explain that. Because I don't believe it was just out of the blue the Germans came here. They started one by one. This process has taken place. So you should be able how they have ended up having Namibia into their hands. So after now they have had Namibia into their hands, there was a war that we call a war of national resistance. National means countrywide. So which means that now, after the Germans have taken over Namibia, these Namibian people did not say yes to this Germans' colonial occupation. They put their hands together so that they fight against this Germans' colonial administration. And that is what we call the War of National Resistance. Now, before they came to this war, what is this specifically that had caused these Namibian people to come together and fight or resist the Germans' colonial administrations? We have got 3 factors. We have got 3 causes. You must be able to explain, describe and explain these 3 causes to War of National Resistance that started in 1904 and they ended in 1908. So now, you should also know if Namibian people have accepted this Germans' colonial administration or they did something towards it. So what they did, this is what we call resistance, fighting back against the Germans' colonial administration. You should know various ways how Namibian people have fought the Germans' colonial administration. Now, when the Germans have taken over Namibia, what is that? The effects they had on the Namibian people. When you talk of the effects, it's not only bad effects. Effects can be good or can be bad. So at the end, you should be able to evaluate. When you evaluate, you give your views. Did the Namibian people benefit from the Germans' colonial administration? Or did they not get anything from it? Was Germans' colonial administration good or bad to the Namibian people? I will repeat again. Did German colonial administration have negative or positive impact on the Namibian nation? Unit 6, this is the part that I have talked about. It's another part of Namibian history, but this is South Africa and United Nations over Namibia. So, as a history teacher, I always like giving an example of a cartoon that we had in history where there are two dogs, and between them there is a bone, a very nice, good-looking bone. You know, a delicious bone. And these two dogs are fighting over this bone. Now, you must look at these two dogs. You must look at this cartoon. The two dogs, one represented South Africa, and the other one represented United Nations. And the bone, this delicious bone between these two dogs, is Namibia. Now, that cartoon is representing the fight that was between the United Nations and South Africa over Namibia. So, we have a lot of topics down here that we need to know. But before you get to these topics, find out why is it that South Africa is now fighting over Namibia with the United Nations. How did South Africa came in? Because at first we were talking about the Germans over Namibia. You must be able to know why is it that now we are talking about South Africa over Namibia. So in other words, how did South Africa take over from the Germans? Because now the fight is no longer between United Nations with the Germans, but it's with South Africa. How did South Africa take over from the Germans? You should be able to know about that. Now, there are a lot of incidents that have taken place in Namibia. Here we have Windhoek Massacre. So these are the topics that will be in exams. You should be able to know what Windhoek Massacre is all about. So, in short, when someone has to go about incidents like Windhoek Massacre, I would like you to ask yourself about this. What is a massacre? Must be able to ask yourself, what is a massacre? When did it take place? For you to be able to know exactly what the Windhoek Massacre was all about. What is a massacre? You ask yourself, what? When did this Windhoek Massacre take place? How? You ask yourself, how? How did the Windhoek Massacre take place? Why? Why did Windhoek Massacre take place? And then the last one is the consequences, the results. What is there that has taken place after the Windhoek Massacre? So if you relate yourself to these questions, what is a massacre? When did this Windhoek Massacre take place? How did it take place, the development? Why did it take place? And the consequences or the results. What happens after the Windhoek Massacre? You'll be able to score marks by answering this. So now Windhoek Massacre, after all these points that I've mentioned here, there are a lot of things you should be able to know. Now, concerning Windhoek massacre, when people were told you have to move because of the segregation policy that was to take place in Namibia, people did not just decide, no, we are going to move because the South African government is telling us we must move. No, they have resisted. Now, when they have resisted, because they were told on the 9th, move. On the 10th, they decided, the South African government decided, these people have told them the previous day they did not move, so today we are going to do something about it. What these people have done, they decided not to move. So they refused. Now you must be able to give reasons why these people of old location refused to move to Katutura. Now, that's all about Windhoek massacre. Now you should also be able to know about Resolution 435. What are the points of Resolution 435? What is that delayed the Namibian independence? So know when the Resolution 435 was adopted, when it was implemented, and why is it that there was a delay in the Namibian independence. So we have also the contract labor system. What is the contract labor system? How was it contracted in Namibia? And what effects does this contract labor system had on the Namibian people? So the last unit here is South African history. You must know the apartheid policies that were applied for blacks in South Africa. Then you should be able to know about the effects of apartheid. Effects means either good or bad on the South African people. Now, when this apartheid was introduced for blacks in South Africa, did people accept it? Yes, it's fine with us. They have resisted against it. You should know different ways, various ways how this South African black population have resisted towards or against this apartheid. Now, when people have resisted against apartheid, the South African government has suppressed. To suppress is when you put down the resistance. So you have to know why they have suppressed it. Okay? Now, different ways how people have resisted against apartheid. We have incidents like Sharpeville. You should be able to explain what Sharpeville incident is all about. We also have incidents like Soweto uprising. Different way how they resisted. We also have the role that different individuals like Nelson Mandela, different parties like ANC, different parties like PAC have, and different or role models like Steve Biko have done in South Africa in against resisting apartheid. So you should know all the factors that contributed towards the end of apartheid in South Africa. Now, general principles of answering history questions. Each question consists of 3 questions, 1, 2, and 3. The first question, you only need to describe what is asked in brief. The second question, you need to explain a description and explanation. You should avoid the repetitions. Now, the third question, and the most important one, it requires you to balance. For example, the Treaty of Versailles was fair and unfair. So you have to have answers on both sides. This is the end of my presentation. Good luck.